Okay, welcome to the chapter event. We do have two speakers today. I'll introduce the first one and then we'll take a tiny break in between, and I'll introduce the second one again later. So right now we have secure vibe coding with Matt Brown. Okay, hi. I was saying that we are going to have two talks today, and the first one I'll introduce right now, and then we'll take a tiny break, and then we will come back with our next speaker. So right now we have our first presentation. This is Matt Brown, and I'll let him introduce himself, but he's going to be talking to us about secure vibe coding. And then afterwards, we'll have the AI AppSec nightmare with Jerry. Okay, have a great day. Let's hand it over.
Okay. Everybody hear me okay? Is this a good volume? And hopefully the people on YouTube aren't getting their ears blown out on headphones as well. So yeah, I'm Matt. I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to go over and stuff like that. I'm a solutions architect at a company called Endor Labs. Just a heads up, there will be a raffle today. I'll put this up again at the very end, but if you guys just do it now, go for it. Enter to win. I think towards the end or like right after, we'll actually like pick a winner, and it's a cool little Star Wars Lego set. Everything you see there. First question everybody asks is, how have you guys not been sued by Disney? Disney is not making a security scanning tool anytime soon. We're not going to make a movie anytime soon. And the day Disney comes knocking on our door will be a good one, because I don't know, then we'll have made it, kind of thing. A little bit about me. Who is this guy with the weird beard and hair? Like I said, solutions architect at Endor Labs. Before this, I was in cloud security and vulnerability management. I was before that, I was a very early SE at a company called Sneak that I turned into a SCA specialist for. Before that, I was a software engineer, got my master's in computer science. I'm from Boston originally, currently reside in Wayne with my wife and two beautiful girls who I think are watching. So Maddie and Emmy, make sure you eat all your dinner before any treats. And I like golf, woodworking, carpentry, and I'm a huge Helldivers 2 fan. If anybody plays Helldivers. Nobody? Well, that joke doesn't land. It's an awesome game, in case anybody wants to play it. It's so much fun. So, vibe coding. Kind of today, unless you've been living under a rock, deep in the ocean, in a cave, you've kind of noticed some drastic changes that have been happening in software development, right? A lot of stuff has been changing, and I don't know about you all, but for me, it's like every 5 minutes, every time I breathe, there's some new hype that's going around, right? So the way that things are changing, or what is kind of getting changes, how we build stuff, what we build, and who builds it, right? So how we build things. And if you would have asked me a year ago, oh, prompt engineer is a real title, I would have said that's ridiculous. Now, I think that's changing a little bit. You do kind of got to be skilled a little bit in prompting if you want to use these effectively. And I'm going to call them assistants probably throughout this presentation, because old habits die hard, but you can kind of think of these as co-authors, right? These pilots, things like Windsurf or Cursor, Replit Ghostwriter, all these different kinds of things have been popping up left and right. So it's almost like, and we'll get into this in a little bit, of software engineering versus programming, where how we build things are now with a lot of prompts and with like a co-author. Now, I have my own opinions on stuff that we can dig into a little bit later, but this is kind of like a very marketly, worldly, businessy view of how people view stuff. But once you kind of dig deeper, we can get more into it, kind of thing. What we're actually building, and kind of in the beginning, what was it, right? It was all chatbots. Everybody's building a chatbot to do something, and that wall was knocked down incredibly quickly. So now it's not like, okay, the models aren't hard coded in like an application. Now you can bring your own model. You can choose your own model. You can switch up different models. You can use different models for different things. They're making real-time decisions, right? You're now starting to see applications that are like embedding these co-authors or these LLMs within like the app itself. And Cursor is actually a good example of this, because what is Cursor? Cursor is just a fork of VS Code that has AI implemented really well into it. But it's just VS Code. So you're kind of seeing these things that people are building where it's like embedded in. And then who builds it? I don't like this term, interns who never sleep. I actually kind of hate that term because that's not really like what it is, right? But that's how a lot of the business kind of looks at it. I think a lot of like the market. So it's kind of our job to help like educate them. Hey, this, it's not really an intern who never sleeps. These are things to help us move quickly. But just because you don't, just because you move quickly doesn't mean that that's good. Fast is not always good. It's sometimes great. But we're going to talk a little bit about vibe coding and kind of the things that we've learned. But for today, out of these three things, what we're going to talk about most is how we actually build stuff, how we build it, okay? Who's used Cursor, Copilot, who works at a company that's used it? I'm going to assume everybody, right? So if I say Cursor, people know what I'm talking about. Okay. Does anybody remember this? So for those that don't know, because we have a wide audience, I want to cater to everybody, right? What is vibe coding? And I'm not going to read this whole thing, but this is Andre Karpathy. Can never pronounce his name correctly on the first time. Pretty much coining the term. And he's like one of the greats in LLMs. I think he taught one of the first courses at Stanford for AI or something like that, CS2 something. But essentially, to kind of summarize this, it's just kind of going with the vibes, prompting the AI, saying, hey, I want to build this, build it for me. Like the most use of AI with the least hands-on keys kind of thing. And essentially what I kind of think of it is, it's just YOLOing on steroids. It's just throw it in the air, see if it builds. Oh, it works, great, good, go. That's the kind of vibe, that's what vibe coding is. But what do we kind of got to understand about these code assistants, right? So what's an LLM, right? It's going to take your idea, you give it a prompt, it's going to make very fast, it's going to make code pretty fast for you. Sometimes it's functioning, sometimes it's not. And we'll kind of see our own little case study of what happened there. The kind of really interesting thing is it enables non-programmers to be programmers. And half of me loves that, half of me is scared of that. Because half of me loves that is like, great, more people getting into this. I love that. I want to open up the community more, especially like maybe that'll open the door to AppSec a little bit more. I think that's great. It scares me a little bit, and I'll give you an example. We were working with a customer that is a large bank, and he said, of course I'm worried about the code that the devs check in and push up to GitHub that's written by AI. And remember, this is a large bank that is does a lot of insurance. He said, I'm more worried about the actuaries that are not programmers that love Cursor because they do all this data science stuff in Cursor. And they just blindly throw it in GitHub, but they have zero idea what the code actually does. It's like, I'm more scared of that than I am of actual developers, which I thought was pretty funny. And the other kind of thing we got to remember is what are these LLMs trained on, right? Open source, majority of them, right? I'm going to talk in a lot of generalities today. They're mostly trained on open source code, right? It brings a lot of the good stuff about open source code in, but a lot of the not so good stuff about open source code in, right? All the great, hey, it's open source, everybody can read it, it's wonderful. There's some really talented developers out there that put in fantastic practices in their code. But why does software composition analysis exist? It's in order to actually scan for vulnerabilities in open source code. So it brings the good and the bad with it. Any questions so far? And if anybody has questions, just raise your hand. Like we can make this. Yes.
So we have a question from the live stream, and
awesome.
it is, what do you think of Amazon Bedrock Agent Core? They have guidelines that seem to offer some speed to deployment. Any thoughts?
Guidelines are important. The fact that they do have the guidelines baked in. I don't know how they're baked in. Like if there are rules that they just wrote, or they allow you to write rules and guidelines within it itself. I think that's great. We'll talk about guidelines in a minute. What do I think about it? Another tool. It's like how I think about all these other tools. They're all tools. Going back to the carpentry example, if I'm trying to build a house with a hammer, I'm going to get it done. It's just going to be painful and slow. If I use a drill, it's going to be a lot easier and faster for me to do. It's another drill. It's a DeWalt drill instead of a Milwaukee. If anybody knows drills, I don't choose sides with drills. Ryobi. Any other questions? Good. This is also pretty interesting. We talk about programming versus software engineering. And this is the definition of software engineering from Google, and it lays it out. I won't read the whole thing, but like I used to be a software engineer. I am not a software engineer anymore. I would classify as a programmer. I'm not architecting things. I'm not optimizing things to make it faster or have less bloat. I'm not trying to create different algorithms that work with the architecture. I'm not doing any of that now. I'm programming a lot. I'm writing a lot of scripts. I'm writing a lot of, prototypes. I'm writing a lot of, not large scale applications, maybe a container here or there, like nothing crazy. And I think these AI tools are more suited for the programmer, somebody like myself, rather than the software engineer. But the thing that's interesting about these LLMs is what I mentioned about co-authors, right? They can help you write stuff, but you still, I think, need a human. I don't think AI is going to take all of our jobs. I really do not. Because you still need somebody looking at the code. You still need somebody that understands it. You still need somebody that is going to say, this is absolute nonsense and it's completely hallucinated and we cannot check this code in, right? There are tools you can use to make that process easier. But again, it's like you have the programmer, AI, co-author with the software engineer, human, working together to build something faster. I think GitHub CTO even said, I don't know why people are saying they're going to lay off developers, because we're going to hire more, because if you can do something at 10x with 10 developers, you can do something 100x with 100 developers or something like that. So it's all hype. So why doesn't vibe coding work? This is why. Does anybody remember this? I literally spit out my water as I was reading this. This was hilarious, because this is clearly somebody that was like, oh, I can like make money doing this and write something, right? And I can like deploy it and do, oh man, did not like look at like kind of a mile wide and an inch deep. Just said, oh, this works great. It's right. I'm going to make like 200 KRR a month, like blah, blah, blah. No. So he just checked everything in. It worked. I'm sure it worked great. Checked everything in and he just got smoked. Like he was absolutely cooked from the start. And he even says, like, as you know, I'm not technical, so this is taking me longer. He had no idea, because it's not just about code that runs. It's the underlying architecture around it. It's the API endpoints. It's the authorization controls. It's everything, the sanitization, everything surrounding it that makes software software. Like software is very complicated. It is super duper complicated. So companies have thousands of developers. It's not easy. So for somebody to just vibe code something and think like, oh, this is great, got a harsh dose of reality right there, kind of thing. I thought this was hilarious. This was like too funny. So what does this like actually look like in kind of like the real world? So this is like a flow of, will we let the AI interns deploy to prod kind of thing. So I'm, thinking, oh, let me go just write a quick prompt to, hey, I hook up to the database and pull some data on recent users, add a leaderboard. Oh, it works. Good. Push it up. You skip every one of these steps. The SQL database has no authorization. There's no validation, no rate limits. We're going to just completely skip SAST because why not, right? I vibe coded it. And then code review, oh my God, there's 9 million code reviews, approved, YOLO, go, trust me, go, blah. And then you ship it. Well, then what does a malicious actor do? They actually will also utilize AI tools to do some fuzzing and to find some endpoints, grab the data, and now you've just gone ahead and leaked PII because of some kind of problem. It's a very simplified way, but like you could definitely see this happening, kind of thing. Any questions so far? Cool. And this is also pretty interesting, right? I don't know why, personally anyway, I kind of still feel like these co-authors, these assistants are like alpha E and beta E, if that makes any sense. Like they don't seem like very fleshed out. They work pretty good, but like I'm excited to see what happens in like 3 years when they're like more fully fleshed out. They still seem kind of alpha E and beta E, right? That has not stopped anybody from saying, I'm using it. I'm going to use as much as I can. So this number, I believe, and these are all sourced. The sources are here, and you know, you can read those and dig into that. 75% of developers are using AI copilots. I think that actually might be a little higher, but like I kind of think like if you're not, you're kind of missing out big time. 40% of code on GitHub is AI generated. I think that's a little high, but it's coming from Microsoft, so I guess you know it's accurate. That seems like a lot of code, but 40% of it is of the code on GitHub is AI generated.
The CEO on public said we should think that by the end of this year, so that all the codes can be written by AI.
How much of, yeah, but it's like how much of, think of your average organization in their GitHub repos, right? Like we have a customer that has 20,000 GitHub orgs. How many of those GitHub repos do you think are like actually being worked on? Maybe 2,000. The 18,000 are like not being worked on. So like, let's say an org has 100 GitHub repos. 80 of them were just one-offs from some person that was doing AI and checked it in and then bounced. And they have not touched it in 6 months.
The problem is it's not a linear time frame.
Yeah, that's
We're
true.
an exponential.
That's true.
You saw Kim yesterday when we just dropped
Yeah.
multiplicating the reasoning part.
Yeah.
So now it's about defining the contextual.
Yeah.
Not problem.
Right.
So it's they're creating the framework around it and can define guidelines within that framework.
You saw this presentation before today, because we'll talk about that, those different guidelines.
You know, the 40% is from public and or private, but if it's only for public, that number might go higher.
That's true. I don't, but I'm sure the paper does say. I'll get back to you on that one. That's actually a good question. It's got to be public, because how would you know if it was private? No. Yeah. And 62% of AI generated code has issues. That might be okay. It could be a little bit higher, as you'll kind of see in a second. Issues mean like vulnerabilities, bugs, it just doesn't work, right?
What's the percentage of developers?
That's an even better question.
Is there actually a better job or worse job?
If it's mine, it's more than half. Yeah, it's a good question.
There's a request from the audience to maybe repeat the question if that's possible.
Yes, which all the questions?
No, like going
Oh,
forward.
just going forward. Yes, I'll repeat the questions going forward. Yes, 100%. So what did we do? We, like, as this was kind of blowing up, right, we actually ran our own little experiment. We said, let's just see what happens from a security standpoint, from a kind of bloatware standpoint, from an optimization standpoint, when we ask Cursor to make an app for us, kind of thing. And what we found was it added a lot of garbage, for sure. It originally added 1,292 dependencies, right? And keep in mind, this is JavaScript. This is also a JavaScript problem, not just a not just a Cursor problem. JavaScript has a lot of dependencies. And what's funnily enough with that, right, is even after it finished, we said, hey, can you reduce the amount of dependencies, please? It added more. It said, sure, I'll reduce, and then added another 400 dependencies or 300 dependencies. I mean, that's a problem, right? You could be adding outdated dependencies. We'll talk about data and kind of the more like when cutoff dates are for these LLMs, how you can help reduce, like, I don't know, Cursor just adding some random dependency that hasn't been touched in a year and has had 6 or 7 versions in the past 3 months, right? It had, of course, 65 critical CVEs, because what happens when you add all these dependencies, it could be outdated. They don't have the real-time data to say like their cutoff date could be January of 2024, and new CVEs have been disclosed, but it gets added anyway because when it builds it at first, it says, oh, this looks fine. And it just adds a ton of bloat and a ton of, tech debt too. That's the other problem. 700 SAST issues, not good. And it took 10 minutes to write, but it didn't work. So we ran this little experiment just to see, like, okay, not only will we actually build something and see how it goes, but we'll also scan it. And these are the pieces of information that we actually found and dug up. And actually, speaking of YOLO, I'm gonna show a little bit of what maybe that looks like in Cursor as well, because this is OWASP after all. We want to get a little bit technical at least. So what did we actually do? Make sure I have mine on. Okay, good. We'll talk about MCP servers in a minute or two and the rules and everything like that. But I'm going to just start this off for now. We're going to let it run in the background, if I can get my mouse to work. And we're going to check in on it every once in a while we're talking here. Let's get rid of that. We're going to do CloudForce on it. All right, good. So depending on how good the internet is, they'll probably take a bit. We'll check in on it a little bit later as we kind of talk about rules and guidelines and like how we can optimize. So what were some things that we learned here? I'm actually going to refer to some notes a little bit for a second here. I lost my train of thought. I can't ever say this word. Non-determinism is both a good and a bad thing, right? These LLMs are meant to be non-deterministic. So what does that mean? That means that you could ask it the same prompt twice and get 2 different results. And that's good for creativity and good for like reasoning, but that's not so good for kind of getting consistency and getting things to work, right? One thing that we'll talk about a little bit too is what you can do is use models like, I don't want to say against each other, but like on each other. Like you build something with one model and then like have the other model write tests based off of what that model built. That's actually kind of a really good thing to do. Same exact prompt. Oh, and model dependencies. Completely lost my train of thought there. They will perform different. That's obvious. But that kind of goes back to, you should never like stick to one model. Like I'll write the same prompt with 3 different models. I'll usually use Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini. I don't know why. I like Gemini a little bit. And it will also depend on kind of like the person I'm trying to be, if that makes sense. This kind of sounds a little bit dystopian, but if I'm like more like trying to, I don't know, prototype some system or some API that talks to GitHub to make GitHub issues, right? Maybe I want to be more like an architect type, so I'll kind of ask it in that way. If I want to be like an AppSec engineer, I'll kind of ask in a way where I want to embed security, and we'll talk about how to do that early on, like when you're prompting and things like that. But I like to use different models, and I think that that's something everybody should do. But also just to remember that a model like open source software is also a dependency within your softwares too. So dependencies aren't just like something from Maven or PyPy anymore. They're, your Jenkins file is a dependency. A scanning tool is a dependency. An LLM is also a dependency, just like anything else, right? And here's an example. I knew I had an example in here. Same exact prompt, 2 different models. GPT 4.1 only added 2 dependencies, while Claude added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different dependencies. Why did Claude add 5 and ChatGPT, 4.1 only 2? We don't know. It just decided to do that. Maybe if you asked it again, it would add 3 instead of 5, right? But testing. This kind of goes back to like, you never know what's going to happen, and which is a good transition, I guess. Expect the unexpected, right? Like I said earlier, software is complicated. You think you're making a tiny change? Well, that could affect something way down the line that could completely destroy everything, right? It's very much like open source stuff where you bring in one dependency, you're really bringing in 20 or 200 because it brings in transitive dependencies, right? You could be completely messing something up more down the line. Yes?
With this experimenting you're doing,
yeah.
Have you found that like the cheaper tiers or free tiers are scarier output than, let's say, Max or Coder?
It depends on how complex the task is. And I'll give an example in a little bit of a very simple task. It's more talking about how you implement security in, but I think it'll apply to that question too a little bit. It's a very simple thing. Chances are a cheap model will be fine, right? If it's like, I'll write a script that loops through a for loop, you can put that on anything, right? If it's a very complex one, the cheap models, they take longer and they will tend to hallucinate a little bit more, but I don't think it's like scary. I think it's more inefficient, if anything, which makes sense. You're not paying as much for it, right? But they can be handy in certain things. I think that's probably the best answer I can give, but that's what we found, yeah. Vulnerability multiplication. So like we saw earlier in the beginning of the experiment, right? We said, hey, make this app. It brought in 1,200 dependencies. We asked it to reduce it, brings in an extra 400. That brings an extra bloat, brings in extra vulnerabilities that could introduce risk. And the kind of interesting thing about this is AI tends to, for whatever reason, just for funsies, they like to make good architectural changes. And when I say good, I mean like kind of significant, like that's a pretty good architectural change, right? Ones that you don't really want or expect, that it thinks it's doing a good job in, but it could really introduce pretty significant risk. And there's an example here. This is something that SAST actually can't catch. So this was an OAuth 2 implementation. And it said, oh, I'm going to simplify the login flow. That's nice of it. Thank you. However, it removes the state parameter from that authorization. And now it's introduced a weakness, right? So this is what was here. And it said, I want to, optimize this a little bit more. I want to make the login flow pretty simple. But then it added this, and it actually removed a lot of the logic that would actually make this more secure. So this is like this isn't like a CVE. I guess you could call it a vulnerability, but it's more like an insecure architectural change that it thought, oh, I better implement this to make the login flow more simpler. My user will appreciate that, when we're like, no, don't do that. We don't want to do this. But it checks all the boxes, right? Yes?
So would tools like DAST help identify, for example?
Would tools like DAST, sure, help identify this?
That's the problem with SAST.
That's the problem with SAST, yep. So this is something that DAST, the question was, would tools like DAST help with this? And the answer is yes, it would. Now, there are companies out there that are kind of using agents and AI for something like pen testing. And at that point, it's like, do we get DAST, or we just start using this agent pen testing? So much things are going to happen in the next year or two regarding tooling and like how it's going to fit in. So like today at, what time is it? 7 on July 16th today. Yeah, DAST would definitely help with this. In a week, I don't know, somebody will come out with something that AIifies it all, right? It's a good question though. Starting with secure prompts. This is the third thing we learned. So I kind of like to think as prompts as like design documents, or what are like some folks call like PRDs or requests for comments, things like that, right? Where it's like, okay, a good security practice is to implement security as early as possible in the design of an application or in the building of an application, the SDLC. In my opinion, you don't get any more left than, well, like the developer's brain, but more like, okay, I'm going to start designing this and making the docs to actually build this out and talk about the architecture. Look at prompts in the same way. If you're just prompting, hey, do this for me, and then you keep going and keep going and keep going, you finally get it working, it's kind of like too late in the cycle. Like start implementing security early in the prompt cycle. There's a new coin that's just been termed, I guess. And implement security earlier, so that way when you're actually utilizing the prompts moving forward, the AI should theoretically remember that and have that context to say, oh, I better implement security like my person told me to do, right? Like just like prime it for security and then take advantage of the reasoning that actually do it, right? So this is one of those examples. This is like the cheap example, right? That I was talking about earlier. Any cheap model, any free model can do this, right? But, write a Python script that takes a host name as an input, pings it 4 times. Simple. Anybody can do that. But this is an example of when you want to actually implement security in, validate the input to avoid security issues. Okay, great. If the host does not replace, blah, 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 I now want to validate the input before executing, right? I like that, like, think of a prompt as like a design doc. You want to start implementing security early in the process. This is probably this goes to the guidelines. This is the guideline-y part. So, rules. I think this is something we're going to hear a lot about in the coming year, are rules. How do I codify rules? How do I deploy rules? I have 3,000 developers across my organization. I want to set standard in place. I want it built into Cursor, and I need them to adhere to it, kind of thing, right? I think this is this whole rules and codifying rules and having like, oh, you need an AppSec version IDE, what's the term, template or something like that. I think that's going to be pretty big, and we'll talk about how MCP server helps with that, and adding rules help that as well. There are ignore rules. There are, hey, use this rule to do that. Use in case you see this function that's been written. I want you to implement this sanitization tool because we've approved it internally. Things like that. And test-driven development is making a comeback. What's old is new again in test-driven development. Our CTO is very happy with that one. He was very early at Bell Labs, so he's seen it all. Automated checks within the LLM, within Cursor, within these tools to say, hey, anytime a developer checks code, I want you to do ABC 1, 2, 3 using this model to do this and blah, blah, blah. You do something like that. And this is a sample rule, right? That's the example I just gave, where it's like, it just tells the code assistant, the co-author, what to do whenever you see this function. Hey, instead of manually cleaning user input, user input dot replace, blah, 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 use this organization's approved sanitizer. Very, very simple rule, though. Yes, question?
Yeah, so for implementing these security rules or guidelines, like obviously that unit can do that, but have you ever tested like how an LLM would produce these for you, like giving it like a scope in terms of like what scope of security you want, and then like that LLM would generate like those guidelines for you, and how was the experience?
Like any, so the question is, have we actually used LLMs to create these rules? And it's like any other piece of code. Sometimes it works great, sometimes not. And the thing I'll kind of say about just any code generated by any LLM, and we actually get this question a lot, like how do I secure AI-generated code? How do I deploy AI-generated? How do I do this with what do you do with your current code? Do that. It's code at the end of the day. Whether it's AI-generated or not, you still got to secure it, how you're securing the code you write. But as far as having LLMs write these rules, you could absolutely do it. You just have to have good training data put in, because garbage in, garbage out, right? So Have we tried it extensively? I don't think we've tried it extensively. I've tried it like for very simple examples like this, and it's worked fine. But I haven't tried it with like, I don't know of a company that's, you know, has 20,000 GitHub repos and 5,000 developers, and they're still figuring that out. That's what I've seen from customers is like, they're still, because MCP remote servers, I think, just came out like 2 weeks ago or something like that to figure out how to deploy these. So a lot of companies are still figuring this stuff out. I'm sure somebody somewhere will come up with a good idea. I'm too busy with the 4-year-old and 2-year-old at home. Hi, girls, if you're still watching, go to bed. Did you have somebody else have a question? I thought I saw a hand. No. Okay. So, remember what I said earlier? A lot of these models like have cutoff dates of like June 2024. I think that's GPT 4.1 is 2024, June 2024, right? So we talked about this a little bit, right? There's out-of-date code and data, so like outdated dependencies. For example, that's something that we do. We say, hey, this dependency hasn't been touched in like a year and a half. It's pretty outdated. You sure you still want it, kind of thing. But if your training data gets cut off in June of 2024, oh no, it looks good to me. Looks like it'll still work. So getting all this data, this kind of fresh intelligence, this context, this is where MCP servers, I think, play a critical role. Is you may have an LLM with outdated information, but you're not really using it anymore anyway for the information when it comes to this kind of stuff. You're using it more to help you move faster. And so let me go and talk to an MCP that will talk to this tool to grab more relevant information and context and bring it into what I currently know right now. This is a good example. It is GPT 4.1. Man, I have a good memory. That's not the latest version of Fast API. And that's a very Pythonic way of thinking, right? Use the latest version of a dependency. I forget what the latest version of Fast API is, but it's not that. And UVcorn, whatever that is. Let's check in on our cursor friend here. We'll resume the conversation. What's that? Any questions off of this? Makes sense, right? So who's heard of MCP servers? Okay. Multi-context protocol. For those who haven't heard what it is, this is how I think about it. It's an API for LLMs to use. It says, okay, I'm in Cursor, right? I'm using Claude. Well, Claude doesn't have, or GPT or any of these models, they don't have the latest information. They don't have the full context. I want to beef it up with some of my own information, right? So let me utilize an MCP server to go call Endor, grab the vulnerability data to see which dependencies I can fix, which SAST issues are causing troubles. Is my container on the latest version? Does it have vulnerabilities? I want to utilize an external tool to say, hey, give me some more context that applies to me. And this is actually like it's for like Notion and for, I'm sure Salesforce has one or something. Like it's not just vulnerability scanning capabilities. Like it's a lot of different tools that all these companies have come up with for MCP servers. But think of it as like an API for your LLMs or for your co-authors, if you will. And this is, I think, where, and we'll show what hopefully the cursor is done now. But this is actually really cool because you could tell, like with the rules that we were showing earlier, you can actually tell the MCP server like what to do, and you can have these MCP rules. So these are typically like settings within Cursor or within any, I'm going to just use Cursor, but any ID that supports MCP servers. And it's like, this is an SCA MCP server rule, right? I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you say, hey, go look at this file for this rule. And I want you could say, I want you to act like a security expert, and I want you to do this. I want you to do A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. But more importantly, anytime a user checks in code, I want you to check the manifest file and the lock file for any newly introduced dependencies that may include vulnerabilities. And if so, please tell me how to fix them so that I can remediate them before I even check in the code. And what ends up happening is when you have that rule in place, you can, oh, this is perfect. You can kind of see here, as Cursor was building this, adding code, adding code, adding code, and I'm in YOLO mode, meaning just auto accept everything, which you should not do, by the way, but YOLO. You can even see, okay, checking for this dependency, it had a vulnerability before. Oh, now there are no vulnerabilities in it. I know it might be kind of small, but there you go. But you can kind of see here, within Cursor, rules, SCA, ensure newly added dependencies are checked for vulnerabilities and project stays clean. Look at these files. You can kind of get where I'm going here. This is pretty powerful stuff. Now imagine you're an organization that says, hey, we're a Java shop and we really care about SQL injection. Who wouldn't? Before any user checks in code, I want you to do blah, 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 whatever have you, right? So this is really powerful stuff. Yes?
Wait, so the Endor Labs, that's not executed as a Git hook? It's like executed as part of the Cursor agent?
Correct. So the question was, is this MCP tool, like for example, ours, our Endor CLI one, is that not executed as a Git hook? That's executed as part of Cursor's MCP, like when you actually are interacting with it? The answer to that question is correct. It is not a Git hook. It is when you are actually chatting with Cursor.
So is that
Cursor does it.
So like that specific action, it's like when the user checks in code, is that like that's not like a specific like Cursor hook?
You could make it that way. You could implement it that way.
Okay, but that's just not.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like,
Yeah,
correct. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yes. It's not like a Git hook when you specifically check in. It's more like checking in with like Cursor saying like, hey, write me a function that does this. Anytime you interact with the chat in Cursor, it will do this part of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
Is there like what is there a reason why you guys decided to implement that as a first MCP call versus specific table? Like when Cursor actually like writes code
Yeah.
and like checking as
Yes, there are several reasons. I think the number one is devs would hate us because we would be blocking every single check. We would be blocking every single merge, and we don't want to do that. The other reason is we want people to be fixing stuff as they're coding. When you go to check something in, you're quote unquote done. I mean, you're never done, right? But it's like, oh, let me check it in. Done, right? As you're actually interacting with it, as you're actually writing the code, you're interacting with Cursor, that's when we want to do it. If that makes sense.
So doesn't it make that call on every file edit? Or it doesn't like kind of like control like what we're on
You can set it up. You could set it up to, like in this one, I have it set up so it only does it when these are edited, the lock files.
Okay,
Or
but
the,
anytime, like it's like even if it's just edit, even if it just edits a single line in AppSec and CloudSec, like
Yeah.
all this and then
for now, yes.
okay.
Yeah. That's great. It worked. That's great. That it scanned and everything. AI demo, like demos live are scary enough. AI demos are like the ultimate scariness, right? You really, truly do never know what's going to happen. So how do we kind of covered a lot here, but it's like, if you're going to take anything away, it's really what this is about is helping like AppSec and developers. Obviously we want to get better along together, right? But with AI, that's making it an already difficult problem harder, in my opinion, because everybody's just checking in code left and right and YOLOing left and right, right? So how do we kind of help developers write more secure code that they're using AI with, writing more secure? I don't like to say write more secure AI code because it's not, they're writing the code, AI is helping them write it, if that makes sense, right? So you start with secure prompts. We talked about that. Secure by design, quote unquote, secure by prompt. I'm going to coin these terms. Marketing is going to love that, actually. Implement those security standards and guidelines, the rules, and then add security signal, things like MCP servers. I really think MCP servers are like the bee's knees. I think they're awesome because they just can add so much more capability to like everything that you do. And very shortly, I think either tomorrow or Friday, we're going to release a prompt library that we all kind of contributed to. There'll be 40 plus examples. This will be like security specific ones too. So like you can just pull some from GitHub, experiment with the prompts, see how they do. I think my LinkedIn barcode, well, do the Lego set. My LinkedIn barcode is coming after this one. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to send it to anybody when we do release it. And also, like, if you do connect with me on LinkedIn, please feel free to ask any questions or anything like that. I'm happy to chat. And that's it. This was a little plug for Endor, but I don't have to do it. So it's your call. But that's my LinkedIn. Any questions? Informative, good. This is one of the first times we're doing this presentation, so any feedback is welcome. Informative. Did anybody learn anything? Good. All right. Good. That's all that matters. One person learns one thing. That's all I need. Yes.
The question goes back to your slide about the number of developers using AI.
Yeah.
In June, Motley Crue did a
It was good music.
Motley Crue did an article where they talked about 9% of American companies think they're using AI.
Think they're using AI?
Well, 9% of American companies are using AI.
Okay.
But I'm wondering what's going to happen is there going to be a disconnect between a whole whackload of the developers using it and they have no idea that.
I'm telling you this right now. Everyone is using it. Like, they're using it in some capacity. Because think about how it's tempting to use it. Think of, like, I remember in grad school, my Java professor made us write code, not in IDE, but in Notepad. Because he said, you fancy developers all have your fancy IDEs where it does everything for you, right? I will never forget a semicolon in my life now because of him. And I'm glad he made me do that too, because I would not have built the muscle to do this kind of stuff. But damn, is it tempting. And damn, do I wish I had it in grad school, because I honestly, I don't know what's going to happen to a lot of students. Like, if I were to give one piece of advice, please do your best not to immediately go to it. Just write the code first and then use it if you get truly stuck. But think about it that way too. Like, these corporations, all the developers, if you get truly stuck on a problem, what would you do? You go to Stack Overflow. Now I'm just going to say, okay, it may be AI slop, but at least it points me in the right direction. So they're definitely using it. Like, everybody, I think, is actually using it. How much are they implementing it, I think, is the better question. How much are they actually just copying and pasting it, throwing it in there? I think the more senior devs are not doing that, which I think is great. People who have actually written code and then look at it and like, this is garbage. And there's actually a paper that came out earlier this week or last week. They did a study of open source projects, of PRs that were opened, right? And it found that it decreased productivity, increased workload on the maintainers because they had to review a bunch of crap, essentially is what it was. So, like, we're in a weird spot right now with this AI stuff, because like, some people love it, some people hate it, some people think it's going to take over the world, some people don't. I keep going back to the drill example. Like, you can still get it done with a hammer. It's a drill. It will make you go faster. You still need to know how to operate a drill. You still need to know what torque settings to put on and what speed to put it in, right? You don't, make a pre-drill hole. Like, you still got to know that stuff. And I think that's kind of where it's going to land. I don't think it's like Bitcoin again. Everybody was going crazy.
First time you give somebody a nail gun.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you find out you've got 150 nails per.
Yeah, like, it's like, come on, like, it's just going to help us move faster, and that's great. I think that's wonderful, but I think it's super overhyped, and I think we're good right now. I think it's going to kind of like land in that spot of, it's a tool that helps us. That's my own personal rant and take on it. And if I'm wrong, you'll know, because they'll probably take over me first. Who knows? Come for me first. Any other questions? Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. Please do feel free to reach out. I'm happy to, point people in the right direction. I was sitting in one of those chairs when I was a grad student, trying to learn this insanity. So I know how it is. I know where y'all been. But so if anybody needs to reach out or wants to connect or anything like that, please do feel free to reach out. Thank you all for your attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
We're going to spend maybe 2 minutes just to switch to the next speaker. In the meantime, I do want to say a few thanks. Obviously, we are in a beautiful space here, and it's sponsored by Pixie and also the food's coming from Endor. So thank you to both companies, and thank you to Matt and Jairus and Jerry.
We love doing this stuff. Oh, yes. Yes, there you are.
So, folks, we're just going to take 2 minutes, and then we're going to go ahead and jump into the next section. Now, we only have until 8:30, so I just want to make sure we've got time for the talk and time for questions. Okay. Sorry, that was a very quick break. That was probably even less than 2 minutes. All right, first things first, I want to take a selfie with the group. All right, very good, very good. Okay, so we're just going to come right into the next talk. I think that last speaker did a great job of setting up the problem kind of at the code level. Now let's talk about what that issue would be when multiplied against the entire world, right? So we're going to take our focus off our one Vibe app, and we're going to look at the kind of larger context of the implications of all of this stuff. So it's going to be hopefully a fun talk. There we go. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jerry Hoff. I am the founder and CEO of a company called AppSec Training Inc., appsectraining.com. I used to be the head of security at Sony Electronics and Sony Semiconductor. So I was hired as a direct result of what happened in 2014 with that movie, The Interview. So came on board after that and was head of security for Sony Electronics and Sony Semiconductor, and also any other company that happened to be in Japan, for example, Sony Music Entertainment Japan and so forth. So I lived in Japan for many years. Also as the group senior security architect at NTT, which is like the Japanese AT&T. I'm the co-lead of the OWASP virtual chapter. So we actually had a meeting today. So if anybody's interested, you can find us on Meetup. It's a virtual chapter. People from all over the world come and we do these types of things. And I'm a strategic advisor and investor in Pixie.ai. So I'm not employed by Pixie. I just really love the technology. So we found a win-win where I come and give talks and Pixie just very generously picks up the bill. So that is the situation. And yeah, I'll just mention real quickly, I don't work for Pixie, but I used to have my own static code analysis company. And the problem with static code analysis, as was mentioned before, is It gives out a lot of data. It gives you a lot of false positives. And we always depend on the developers to be the ones to remediate and decide what's real and what's not. So that was my problem when I had my own static code analysis company. Well, Pixie solves that problem where they take out all the false positives and they give you patches to all the fixes. So I was like, wow, that is like magic. I want to invest. So that's my relationship with Pixie. And we're going to be talking about AI again. We just had a great set of AI talks, or we had one AI talk, but we're going to be talking about AI a little bit more. So real quickly in the room, how many people vibe code? I know we were talking about vibe coding. Okay, all right, about 25, 30%. I vibe code all the time. In fact, I have to admit, I have a really bad habit of having a good idea, buying a domain, and then never doing anything with it. So over the years, I have like 300 domains. So with vibe coding, I'm kind of working through my backlog of all these domains and building out the apps and so forth. So it sounds like a lot of you are doing that as well. How many people in here are AppSec professionals? Just out of curiosity. Oh, not many. 1, 2, 3. Okay. What is everybody? Coders? Developers? Okay. Testers? Students? Enthusiasts? I love it. That's great. I should have mentioned, I started doing OWASP talks in 2008. So I've been a long time OWASPer. So it's one of my favorite organizations. So the fact that so many people were enthusiasts, that is great. So not to burst your bubble, but I'll just mention AppSec, as much as I love it, as much as you love it, it's kind of broken, right? In the sense that we were never that great at finding vulnerabilities. We kept throwing tools at it. Let's do dynamic, let's do static, let's do manual pen testing, let's do code review, let's do developer education, and we still had tons of vulnerabilities. So it was never perfect. Unfortunately, due to AI, what are we about to see? We're about to see an explosion of code. It's already happening, right? If 40% of GitHub is AI generated, what is it going to be in 2 years, right? And what is that going to mean for the source code base in your company or your organization, or even you personally? It's going to be astronomical. So if we already know that AppSec is broken, and we already know that we're about to have a big explosion, is there anything that can make this situation worse? Well, how about malicious AI agents, right? We're about to see those, and I'm going to show you a little demo of one coming up, where you're going to start to see not just human hackers, but AI agent-based hackers, which should be fun, right? And my final topic is just going to be that we need to change. We need to change. So that's kind of the talk in a nutshell. So let's go back to an old quote that said, software is eating the world. I think it's fair to say now that AI is eating the world, right? Or you could say AI, Yadish likes to say AI is eating software. So basically, all that software that we built, all that stuff we put on the web, it's all been now kind of sucked into AI. Every application we build in the future is going to somehow probably have an AI component to it, right? So we're going to have AI writing code. We're going to have AI components, answering, customization. We're going to be having decisions made by AI. It's going to be just, it's already becoming, a lot of fun. Cursor was already the star of the show in the last talk. I'm sure everybody here knows Cursor. I personally use Claude Code. So the point is, there's a whole bunch of different tools out there that we use for coding. And it's not just you, it's not just me, it's people who are not traditionally coders. And more specifically, people who have never been trained in coding securely are using these tools. So Windsurf, I think Windsurf just got bought, didn't it? Yeah, who was like a VC fund or something, right?
No, Google.
Google hired the execs. It was a bifurcation of execs. Yeah, I don't know what. It's a really weird situation. Yeah, it's a really weird situation. Point is, these are very useful tools. I happen to, like I said, I use Claude Code, which I think is the best. I just use Visual Studio Code, and then I point Claude Code. It's just a command prompt. You can tell it what to do, and it updates. So it's pretty cool. So you know that it's now to the point where anybody can write code, right? You just talk to it in whatever language you want, and it will spit out the application that you want. It's pretty amazing, actually. And Lovable really just makes it even more lovable, right? You just go and you prompt, you can say what you want, And you have all of these different types of applications that it will emit. And the applications are actually unbelievable. I mean, these are things that I would have had to go get funding and, millions of dollars of development dollars. Now I can do in a weekend. It's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So as a result, you can imagine that the social media sphere is going crazy with this, right? It's saying, hey, I built an app in 15 minutes. I made 100K. I did this. I did that. These are continuously coming out. So who's seeing these types of videos and who's reading these blog posts? You? Yep. Me? Who else? VCs. And in the case of security, people in your marketing team, people in your sales team, people in HR, you've got your legal, you've got, who knows? Everybody is doing this and everybody's saying, hey, I bet I could be a coder, right? So I have a friend and she works in city government. And the city happened to be, there was a train strike going on. So the city mayor had asked the staff something like, hey, can someone whip up an app that can do like ride sharing so that everybody who can't get on the train can do ride sharing? And my friend was telling me this. I was like, so the mayor was asking that you recreate Uber like in a weekend? And it doesn't make any sense. Okay, whatever. But the point is now everybody is thinking in terms of automation. Everybody is thinking, oh, we can automate and we can build anything. And to some degree, it is getting more true and more true. There's a lot of very interesting apps you can make in a weekend. So, real quickly, folks in back, it's a little loud. Okay. So NVIDIA's CEO said this quote, it doesn't even matter if you never learn to code because there's a new programming language, whatever language you use, right? So it's very interesting that you've got the world's most valuable company CEO basically saying, hey, non-coders can now enjoy the fruits of automation and development. And I don't think that's a bad thing. From a security point of view, it's scary. But from a human point of view, I love that. I want everybody to code. I love coding. I think everybody could figure out automation is it's an important thing to do. But from a security point of view, this makes me cringe, right? Because you're really kind of telling everybody out there, go ahead and code. And like that tweet that came up, before, people are going to get pwned, right? People are going to get hacked. People are going to lose information. They're going to lose their information. They're going to lose our information, right? It's unfortunate. So I'm calling this, probably everybody does, shadow development. And they're probably in your company. They're in your organization. They're in your university. Your own parents might be shadow developers for all you know, right? So shadow developers really is this concept that everybody's a developer. And the thing about shadow development is it's not going to go through our normal secure SDLC. Now remember, our secure SDLC was broken already, but now you're going to have a whole bunch of development that doesn't even come close to going through a secure SDLC. It's not going to get, scanned most likely. It's not going to get reviewed. The developers aren't going to have a background in security. They're just going to start pushing code into production. Now you might think, well, how do you know this? Well, because for the last 30 years, I've done quite a number of consulting with a lot of companies, and you'd be surprised how many hedge funds and financial organizations are run off of Excel spreadsheets, right? That was developed by somebody 20 years ago, and they just kept building and building and building on top of it. And that's the way that most applications work. Somebody has an idea. They say, oh my gosh, this thing actually works. Oh, it helps us make money. Oh, can you add this feature? Can you add this feature? And they just kind of grow and grow and grow over time. And that is what's going to undoubtedly happen. It's already happening with shadow development. So, do you think your average vibe coder has even heard of the OWASP Top 10? Probably not, right? But even if they had, what is the OWASP Top 10 these days? You've got things like, not that I don't love it, but I use it as a kind of starting point to a conversation with developers who have never heard of secure coding. But look at the categories here, like broken access control. That's a big category, right? There are like multiple industries that live inside that one category. So who how is that going to really help a vibe coder? Like, hey, make sure that your access control is not broken. Oh, okay. Like, they're not going to know what that means. Like, broken cryptographic failures. Oh, yeah, I'm sure they're going to figure, like, that's really going to be helpful. So the point is that your vibe coders, your shadow developers and so forth, you know, they're not even really kind of exposed to these basics. So when we talk about insecure code being generated by LLMs and by AI models and so forth, you know, unfortunately, the developers and the shadow developers are not even going to have that background, even those terminology and that language to kind of know what they need to be looking at. And it gets even worse when you look at something like the OWASP ASVS. Is everybody familiar with this topic or this project? No, if you don't know the OWASP ASVS, stop everything, go download the OWASP ASVS and read it. It is the Application Security Verification Standard. It's my favorite OWASP project. It's got about 350 specific things that you need to look for in order to validate an application is secure. And even these 350 things sometimes can be very large kind of buckets, right? Like secure coding architecture, verified that locks used consistently to avoid threads getting stuck, blah, 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 blah. So these are things that are kind of tactile, you know, check boxable type things that people can look for in their code to see, you know, give you a better chance than not of being more secure. A lot of companies are using this as the basis of their secure coding standards. But my question to you is, does your average vibe coder know these things? Yeah, no. Right, even as a developer, you don't know, right? Exactly. So what are we doing when we tell the world, hey, you can vibe code? Are we kind of sending them into like are we sending them into the meat grinder or what's going on? Kinda, yeah, kind of. So this is not where our problems start and end, unfortunately. Has anybody heard of the story of XZ-utils? Okay, oh good, all right, about 20-30%. XZ-utils is a compression library that's used in nearly every distro of Linux on the planet. What happened with XZ-utils? So XZ-utils is maintained, like many other open source projects, by a volunteer someplace in the world. I forgot. I think this guy's in Iowa or something. I don't know. But it's an individual contributor who was maintaining this project for the benefit of everybody in the world. What happened was, all of a sudden, he started getting pull requests and so forth by cyberbullies. And these cyberbullies started really mentally harassing this poor maintainer. They're like, hey, you suck. This thing was supposed to be out a long time ago. Why haven't you implemented this feature? Why haven't you implemented this feature? And he's trying to keep up with all of their like bullying. And this went on for not 1 month, not 2 months. This was like a year and a half of them harassing him, to the point where this maintainer of an important library that goes into every Linux distribution on the planet, which is the majority of all computing, he basically said, you know what, I'm sick of you guys bullying me. Here, you take the project. And made these two cyberbullies into maintainers of the project. Now, the cyberbullies were no average cyberbullies. It turns out, we believe, they were state-sponsored actors. So the minute they had control over this very widely distributed library, what did they do? They maliciously put a backdoor into XZ-utils, backdooring every Linux distribution on the planet, more or less. Not every. Right? And somebody say, well, this version of, okay, fine, whatever, but a lot. So that's kind of scary. And it was only because this, thanks to Andreas Frund, he's a Postgres developer working at Microsoft, noticed something strange and was able to figure out that there was a backdoor. And this backdoor was given a CVSS score of not 9.8, not 9.7, not 9.9, 10. 10. That's really bad. That's really bad. And How many of those are out there where we don't have a Andreas Freund finding these for us? We don't know. It could be a lot because there's a lot of open source libraries, a lot of open source projects that are out there that are widely distributed. Is your average vibe coder, shadow developer, or even normal developer gonna? We're sending people into the lion's den. Is my point. All right, it gets even worse when we talk about dependencies. I'm sure you've had this problem. Has anybody used OpenAI to develop a code, develop code? Never do that again, right? No, use Claude, right? at least. Okay, very good. Use Gemini? Okay, good. I was just kind of picking on OpenAI, but OpenAI, most of the time, I talk to write a program, it doesn't even compile. Like, what were you thinking, right? But very frequently, in fact, this happened to me not too long ago. I was trying to build I was vibe coding, not even really vibe coding. I'm going to call it AI-assisted coding. I was using AI to help me build essentially something that would dynamically generate PowerPoint presentations. So I kind of said, and I know that Python has, Python dash PPTX and things like that. So I was pulling libraries in. I told it what I wanted it to do, and I did notice that there were some libraries in there that I'd never heard of before. And then I looked them up on PyPy, and they don't even exist. So what happened was AI tools will hallucinate package names. So they will say because the way it's not really hallucination, like it's taking LSD and just it's transposing what it thinks. It's using basic, it's using statistics to say, well, this should exist. Like this package name should exist, and then it gives you non-workable code. This seems to be a pervasive problem. There's a lot of hallucinated package names. It looks like is there a number here? It's a very large number. It's yeah, I thought I had a percentage number. Oh yeah, there it is. And now it's to show that 21.7% of the package names don't even exist. So you're thinking, well, big deal. So the code breaks, there's no package names, etc. But that's not exactly what happens. What happens is the bad guys do what? They go create that package name, right? So they figure out, okay, if the common person who's building a web application or a common business application, if you have one of these AI models saying, all right, this package name should exist and it doesn't, well, they will go create that package name, put malicious code in it, and now their trap is set. And now all of a sudden these AI models are leading people directly into the lion's den, so that when they compile the code on their laptop or on their workstation, what happens? Those malicious dependencies are downloaded to their computer, they execute, and now potentially you've got malicious code, arbitrary code injection, you've got malicious code of the developers or the shadow developers or the vibe coders' computer, and they're pawned. Sound bad? Sound good? Sound bad?
Normal.
It sound normal? Yeah, it's nothing new. All right. There's another part to this. AI models themselves. Everybody now who's coding, even your vibe coders, they're not just well, write me a shell script that does X. They're wanting to interact with AI as part of the application. And that leads a huge new set of vulnerabilities, right? Because we don't even know. These AI models are so large, it is impossible to really weed out all the potential risk factors that would come in of hooking up an AI model to an application. You probably heard of things like, oh, there was an AI application hooked up to the sales program, hey, what can I tell you about this thing? And somebody was able to convince the AI model to sell it for a penny or something like that. So there's all those kind of weird things, but we don't even really understand all the depth of the risk that can come out of using AI in applications. So there is a new project, the AI SVS. Sorry to tell you about the ASVS. Well, this is the AI SVS. It's run by a friend of mine, Jim Manico. In fact, at the OWASP virtual chapter, he just gave a presentation on this today. But the point is, we are trying to figure out, and I'm a contributor to this project as well, we're trying to figure out, all right, let's wrap our arms around this giant problem that is, risk coming from AI models, and let's try to get, let's try to codify it so people can verify that it is, they've done their due diligence in terms of reducing risk. Okay, so this next slide's a little bit strange. Like, what is going on with this? Here's my question to the group. You love AppSec. I love AppSec. We all love AppSec. But when in the real world, when you talk to your average CISO and so forth, most of them are going to tell you that most of their funding and money and effort does not go towards application security. It goes towards network security or maybe cloud security. Why is that? Why do we have this weird world where the beauty of AI vulnerabilities of AppSec vulnerabilities, goes very deep. I don't want to call them beauty, but it's really like there's so many permutations of vulnerabilities in applications. Well, then why are the bad guys focused mainly on network issues and cloud issues? Yes, in the back. That's it. Because if I can just rephrase, applications are very, very difficult. They're very deep. Applications, making exploits for applications is not easy. You have to understand coding. You have to understand quite a number of things. And it's not really reproducible, right? Unless you find a vulnerability in WordPress, well, then you can use that vulnerability a lot of different places. But if I find a vulnerability in your application, I can't reuse it anywhere else. Does that make sense? So that's a lot of effort I got to put in to break your application. Now, some people will do that. If it's Facebook, if it's, some, really popular app, yeah, they will spend a long time to figure out a vulnerability. But if it's your internal business application, it's much less likely that attackers are going to spend time on it. What do attackers like to do? They like things just like everybody else, things that are fast, repeatable, dependable, right? So the developers use things like Metasploit and so forth, that they can pull out a tool, they can point it towards a target, they can type in some commands, right? Load this exploit, right? And launch the exploit and get results. So they're going to be going after those things that are very easy. You guys agree with that? Not saying that you don't have professional state level actors out there that will put in time and effort. Not saying that, but most attackers are going to do this because they're looking like everybody else. What is the fastest way for me to go from zero to money, right? That's what they're looking to do. So as a result of this habit of attackers, although we think AppSec is bad, it's actually way worse than we even think because we don't even have wave after wave of dedicated AppSec attackers like we do with network security and cloud security. So far, so bad? Okay. So as a result, we've hooked internal web applications up to a lot of stuff. I used to be a pen tester and a code reviewer. And I remember this was 15 years ago, reviewing web applications that I found a vulnerability that could potentially turn off the electrical grid or turn off people's electricity in an entire metropolitan region, right? It wasn't really like turning off the power of the station. It was essentially, there was a vulnerability in the web app that allowed the people who checked the meters to say that they hadn't paid their bill, so you could turn the electricity off. And so there was a cross-site scripting vulnerability in there, and so you could do it to everybody. Exactly, right? So we've got all these web apps in the back. There's factories that are run on web applications, right? There are water stations and power plants and everything. We've hooked everything up to web apps because those are the easiest. Nobody writes thick client applications because you have to distribute the new versions. You have to do everything. Where web apps, you use a browser. The browser can make API calls. It can talk to all sorts of devices and legacy machines and whatever, and you can control it through a web app, which is very nice. If you've ever gone to the doctor lately or the dentist or even the barber, they pull in all of your data into web apps. Right? Everybody agree? Okay. Well, AppSec's been broken. The truth is, you know this as well as I do, that when we talk about secure SDLC, what we mean is developers code, we might put it through dynamic. Is dynamic foolproof? Is DAST going to find all your vulnerabilities? No. No. In fact, I used to work at a DAST company, and I know that, you can't exercise 100% of an application because applications are almost infinite, right? If you have a calendar app, it never ends, keeps going, right? You can't exercise every piece of functionality. Maybe you can, depending on the size of the app, maybe you can't, right? Some apps you cannot, because I know this, because we would run dynamic analysis on apps and it would never run. It would never, so you have to be kind of statistical on what you pull out. And then even with the 10% that you're looking at or so, it's not exercising all the functionality in that page because it doesn't know, right? Dynamic is just kind of clicking around and putting data into fields and things like that. So DAST actually exercises a small percentage of the application. Yes, sir.
But now we have opportunities, even within the framework.
Yes.
We can let them just browser, run that happens, and we can
Yeah.
use this as a feedback to.
Yes, things are getting better. Absolutely, yeah. It just all depends on price, cost, and everything else. But what I love about that, so even if I say DAST is kind of broken, but it's better than nothing. SAST, I used to have a SAST company, so I'm a believer in static analysis, but there's limitations to that as well, right? So here's the deep dark secret though. Even if you found every vulnerability in an application and you give this to the developers, what happens? We're human. First of all, you're going to have a bunch of false positives. So they're going to look at this thing and say, the first false positive, they're going to be, okay, how do I get through this as quickly as possible? Okay, false, 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 false. And they might look at one little thing that like kind of looks cool, like, okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and fix that. And that's happened to me, and I'll look at it and say, well, why did you fix this vulnerability? They'll say, well, because it was untrusted input. But the untrusted input is coming from like the system clock. So I don't really know that that's really an attack vector, right? So the truth is, we're leaving up to the developers to decide what's real and what's not real. And then, even if you took the false positives out, what they normally do, and this is not a dig on developers, not at all. I'm a developer, I love developers. They just don't have time. So they will normally fix the criticals. So you might have 20 criticals. You might have, you might have 15 highs, and then nobody reads the rest of the report, right? Mediums, lows, and notes never get looked at. Trust me, right? So you do have all these vulnerabilities at this bottom tier that are kind of piling up. And the problem is you can take a medium and take another medium and create a critical, right? It's just when you look at them individually, right, in each vulnerability, you don't see the additive nature of these things. That's what I mean by saying AppSec is broken. Because it's really expensive to have your developers that the meter is running, and instead of having them put in new features, you're having them fix vulnerabilities. Well, your human capital costs are going to go up by whatever, 50%. If you do that, you're going to go out of business. Okay. On top of that, by the way, just so you know, if you've ever been involved in these meetings, there's also a lot of wrangling of what even constitutes a critical. So I've been in innumerable meetings where it's like, oh, the team such and such wants to meet with you. Okay, what's up, guys? Well, it says that this is a critical, but we really think it's a medium because of this reason, because of that reason, and multiply that over how many millions of web applications that we've built, and then how many millions of scan results that are coming out. You can see that all of our applications are riddled with vulnerabilities. Okay. All right. Sorry, this is not the most optimistic talk. To make things worse, we also have huge number of legacy code that are just sitting out there nobody's scanning them, and they're just getting more and more vulnerable every single day. Okay. I'm just telling you, this is the world that I see, right? This is just the world that I see. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare. And it's the title of this talk, all right? So now what really makes it a nightmare? Because you're saying, but Jerry, we've had all this. This is nothing new. All right, yeah, we're going to have more code. Okay, our SDLC isn't so great. Yes, we don't really fix all the vulnerabilities. Yes, we've got aging code. All right, but what makes it really, really bad? Here's what makes it really, really bad. Remember when I said that most attackers are not going after web applications because it's too difficult? Okay. Well, we're going to see that AI agents are going to change the game. They're going to change the game. So yeah, this is just a summary of all the stuff I talked about, right? Developers now build software with AI. surge of AI-generated third-party libraries and tools. Departments and startups are chasing AI profits, blah, blah, blah. So this is all part of the nightmare. Now let's talk about how AI will start attacking applications. Well, number one, Google says, hey, we used Project Nap Time to find a 0-day in a pretty big library. What was it again? SQLite. Oh my gosh. Okay, SQLite. SQLite. Every single mobile application that you have has a SQLite database in it by default, and it's the world's most widely used, database. So that's not good to find a 0-day in SQLite. But you're like, well, that's Google. All right, they probably, they did it, but who else can do that? Well, here's a guy that said, well, yeah, I used ChatGPT to find a 0-day in Linux kernel, SMB implementation. And it wasn't that he found it from the beginning. This had already been kind of known, this vulnerability. So he took the code that was vulnerable and he fed it through ChatGPT, he basically had to retransform the code so all the relevant methods were kind of in a row, and then he fed it into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT found the vulnerability. But what's interesting is it didn't find it every time. He actually did this 100 times, and it found the vulnerability 8. It's kind of weird. So I don't know why it's just strange to me. So, it's non-deterministic, right, as we were talking about before. So it found the vulnerability 8 out of 100. But nevertheless, it means that bad guys who have a lot of time, maybe, can sit there all day and be feeding things into even something as basic as ChatGPT and popping out potential 0 days. So this gets even worse when we talk about AI agents. What are AI agents? They're agentic framework. They are autonomous entities that essentially they are AI-powered agents. That's kind of using the definition but they're out there acting on the world, using tools, using AI as the driver of their decision-making process. So we're going to talk about an AI agent attacker, and this is nothing more than screenshots. I'll tell you what you're about to see. Everybody's familiar with HackerOne, right? What is HackerOne? It's a big collective of hackers. So you can, I've used these at companies I've worked for, where we say, hey, we've pen tested this, we DASTed it, we SASTed it, we source code reviewed it, we pen tested it, but we'd like to have a bunch of hackers sit there and just beat on it on this application and see if they can come up with anything. So, there's HackerOne and there's BugCrowd, so there's 2 of these. Does anybody know who the #1 bug bounty recipient is for HackerOne? Yes, sir. Okay, all right, so did they get dethroned recently? Interesting, okay. So for a period of time when I made this presentation, the #1, oh yes, sir. So the comment was Expo, but you're thinking, is that a person? Expo is an AI agent. So an AI agent, at least for a period of time, was the #1 bug bounty recipient in all of HackerOne. That's kind of scary, because we're at the very beginning of this AI global transformation, and already the #1 bug bounty recipient is an AI agent. So the company happens to be called Expo, XBOW. So I called them up. I'm like, hey, I heard about, congratulations. Can I see what Expo is? And they're well, because it's not a tool that they release. It's something that works on the back end and does bug bounties. So they gave me a sneak peek, and I said, hey, can I show this at some OWASP talks? They were very generous and said yes. So I'm going to show you some behind the scenes of what this tool does. It's very interesting. Think of it like an autonomous ChatGPT with Kali Linux. That's what it's like, right? So it's kind of cool, because the challenge that they happened to show me was a gray box example, meaning they gave it a working implementation, and then they gave it source code. So they basically gave source code and implementation to this AI model. And that's not much different than what I used to do, right? I used to be a penetration tester in code review. I did this for banks all over the world. And they would do the same thing with me. Lock me in a little room, usually treat me very badly, and say, you've got 2 weeks and find some vulnerabilities. You're thinking, why were they treating you badly? I don't know, because they were, I don't know, they were just that way sometimes. Yeah, they were like, we don't want you to be here. Our bosses make you come in here, and you're going to make us look bad. So it was like kind of a psychological thing. So basically here, there's a challenge, and it says, we want you to look into this jar, and we want you to essentially, they gave it a goal of capture the flag. So they said, here's the working source code, here's the source code, here's the working application. In the working application, we put a text file on the server of this working application. AI, your job is to figure out a vulnerability where you can get arbitrary file inclusion, or you can grab arbitrary files, and then you can get the, get the contents of this TXT file. So far, so good? What was scary is as we kept going through, he showed me, this was the CTO over at Expo, he showed me everything that it did. I was a bit too exuberant. I took 15 screenshots, so it does get a little bit annoying after all these, so I'm not going to go super slowly. But at the bottom, you can see kind of like the timeline of what it took. You're going to see that timeline grow. And you'll see certain things that it figured out very quickly and certain steps it figured out very slowly. But it went in there and it started, grepping for controller, servlet, API, and endpoint, very similar to what a human would do. It then, starts figuring out, it starts doing its rationale and its reasoning. You know how it does on AI, it tells you what it's thinking. It was really kind of cool and scary to see an AI thinking that way and putting out, okay, this is what I need to do to exploit this application. I need to do X, Y, and Z. We need to know the endpoint, API/config, and the method, post. We need to require content type, application/host zone. Does anybody know what HOCON is? To be honest, me neither. To be honest, neither did the Expo team. That was what freaked them out, because this AI agent started looking at, apparently this is like an alternative JSON type structure, and it figured out that there was a vulnerability in the parser for this HOCON library, which is probably something that most humans would have not even worried about, because you're like, well, I'm going to go with, I don't know, we're going to go with what we know, right? JSON and this and that and whatever. But this thing figured this out, and it started writing all, kind of like the movie The Terminator, it starts writing all sorts of scripts that a human could write, but it would take you half a day. It took it half a second. Oops. So it basically starts writing out scripts to do, probing and testing and footprinting of the technology where it thinks that there might be a vulnerability. It then starts pulling out, like I said, it's got like, the equivalent of Kali Linux. So it starts using command line tools to do further testing, to see if there's vulnerabilities there. And this is all happening super, super quick. It then starts, looking deeper into what looks like, the binary of Java, whatever like the bytecode is. But it looks like it's doing something along those lines, looking for some way to get into the system. It sits there and it does a pretty good analysis of itself. Like, okay, well, I tried this, this didn't work, that didn't work. Oh, let me try a Python script that tests out various HOCON structures with authentication. So again, maybe I took too many screenshots. I was just so amazed by this as it goes through each of the branching parts of the logic that would take a human being 2 weeks, and it did this, within a number of minutes. So without getting too much, it kind of goes over and over again, and you can see the timeline getting longer and longer. It writes new, it's writing new scripts for itself. It's using requests, which means it's almost like the Terminator version of DAST, right? It's writing its own way to interface with the web application, all custom to whatever happens to be checking at that moment. And it says here, based on our findings, we need to explore HOCONs include URL functionality, which might allow us to include files with custom URL schemes. So it writes more code, it does, it discovered that the include file syntax is accepted by the parser. Let's write more code and now test out the next part of the challenge. Blah, blah, blah. I guess it got a little bit too much, but it was just amazing that it really gives such good notes. And without getting too boring, it finally succeeded, and it was able to get the key. Now, when I saw this, I thought, wow, the world's changing, because we now have a point-and-click way for bad guys to go to web applications and, without spending weeks, months, or years of their life, have AI find vulnerabilities in all those web applications that have been building up over the years. Now, these guys have done this, and they did raise quite a bit of money. I think they raised like 100 million and so forth. But what's that? 70 million. Okay. Did they have that? Was that round B though, right? So what was Series A? 8. Okay. 20 in their seed and 70 in their A. Is that right?
70 or B.
In their B. Okay. Well, okay. So it sounds like if A is 30 and B is 70, then that's the 100 number, right? It sounds like 108 because there was probably a pre-seed. Okay, pre-seed. Anyway, the point is, if you can build this, let's forget about, they just got their Series B. So they got let's just look at, for 30 million, right? For 30 million, they were able to do this. Are there any other criminal groups out there who could invest 30 million? And of course there are. Are there nation-state actors who can throw 30 million and build their own? Yeah. And what's really funny is that if you go on their blog, they actually have a blog posting of how we trained AI to become the #1 bug bounty on. So they kind of give the basic formula of how you train these things. So probably the next version doesn't need 30 million, right? It needs much less. So this is my point, my friends, is that AppSec is changing. AppSec is we no longer are kind of comforted by the fact that you need expertise, you need a certain amount of, you need a certain type of experience to find and exploit web-based vulnerabilities. That's now gone. That barrier's gone. Now people, just like they did with, Metasploit, they could do here by just taking these types of tools, point and click, and find vulns. So this is a long way of saying what worked in the past, or what didn't work in the past, really doesn't work now. So we really have to rethink AppSec, and OWASP is the best place to do this, right? We are the brain trust of AppSec for the world, so we have to consider, how do we radically change what we're doing to basically help secure everything that's going on. Now remember what we talked about. We talked about the vibe coders, the shadow developers, the 10x normal coders are going to be pumping out more code. You're going to have all sorts of AI models. You're going to have malicious AI, malicious AI out there going after aging code, going after vulnerable code. So developers struggle with common security flaws, human developers that is, and AI models as well. DAST is slow. It only tests limited functionality. SAST generates a lot of false positives. So what do? I don't know. I'm just telling you the problem, right? What I think we've got to do is, just like we are going to have AI that helps us create code, and now that we're going to have AI that helps us break code, we have to have AI to help us remediate code, right? So we're going to have that triumvirate of builder, breaker, defender in the AI realm. And it's all going to be happening so fast that, humans are in the loop now, but humans won't always be in the loop, probably. So far, so good. So, basically what I'm saying is things like use AI for threat modeling and so forth. I know a lot of companies that are now building AI tools to kind of help, these faster than, these very fast application development cycles. Apply secure coding generation practices, as we were talking about before. Integrate AI-powered DAST and SAST, right? Automatic vulnerability triage. You can't have humans looking at vulnerabilities anymore. You've got to have AI figure out what's real and what's not real. And then, as much as possible, have AI actually generate the fix for the vulnerability. Now, in the future, there might be an all-in-one solution, but I doubt it, because you almost want to have a check and balance where you're going to have one AI model finding vulnerabilities, another one confirming if they're real or not, and then fixing them. So it's going to be that way for a while, and then monitor applications in production using AI insights. So that's kind of the whole talk. AI attackers are already out there. They're already improving. We know that Expo is one, but there's probably a whole bunch. Legacy code contains a lot of serious ones. Nobody's going to deny that. Traditional tools, we've only scratched the surface. Right? There's tons of vulnerabilities out there. So we need to really kind of, unfortunately, there's no way to hold back on this. We've got to go whole hog with AI throughout every part of our SDLC. And that's the talk, right? That's the whole talk. Thank you. Thank you. So we also have a raffle. If you want to take the quiz, if you don't trust QR codes, you could just type that form in there down there. But we're raffling off 2 $50 gift certificates in the currency of your choice, right? It's in US dollars, but Canadian, whatever. Bitcoin. That'd be a better one. And if anybody wants to hook up with me on LinkedIn, feel free. Especially if you're a security researcher or things like that. I do run a company called AppSecTraining.com, so I'm always looking for folks who have interesting insights and so forth. I've got an upcoming podcast that I'll be announcing very shortly called AppSec.fm. So please stay in touch. Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints? Yes, sir. That's a great point. The question is, if AI can barely write, and it can't even write secure code, how can it exploit code? Well, the unfortunate unbalance is always it's easier to break than it is to build, right? So when we're talking about breaking, we can essentially, the whole blog post is up there, but we can feed AI all sorts of techniques and thought patterns and so forth of how to work through vulnerabilities and exploit them. But you're probably right. There's probably going to be always some kinds of vulnerabilities that AI cannot exploit. But you can't deny the fact that the #1 bug bounty recipient was an AI model. So it definitely has this capability. But the short answer to your question is, it is way harder to make an application secure because you've got to fix every possible thing than it is to find one way to break in. That's the basic answer. Very good. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Okay. Cool.
And I haven't obviously here. I haven't read about it, but just in the future, how could we able to, or are we able to contribute to
Sure.
this? And how would that be?
Yeah, just go to the OWASP Slack channel, and under the OWASP Slack channel, you'll see hashtag AISVS, and I'm in there. Jim's in there. There's a whole bunch of people in there, and so we have conversations all day, every day, 24 hours a day, on what's going on with ASVS, what do we need to change, and that's just not AISVS, that's all the OWASP projects. So yeah, the Slack channel, if you're not on the OWASP Slack channel, definitely do that. Very good. Any other questions?
How long did it take Expo to do that? How long was that pen test?
That pen test was 20 minutes.
Was it live?
It was, he was showing me a recapture of the whole thing, but he was able to pause it and stuff like that. Yeah. Very good. Any other questions?
They're going to be doing a live hack in real time at Black Hat.
Well, there we go. There we go.
What's the target? Do you know what the target is? I don't think they can ask them. Oh, interesting.
So you guys got a sneak peek of yeah, what is to come. Yeah, if you go, so if you're you have got to be an OWASP member and have an OWASP ID. It's not, yeah, unfortunately not. Yeah, you've got to be an OWASP member, but yeah, that's. So there are global chapters all over, right? So we're here, right? So yeah, this is. Yeah, apologies. Yeah, so this is the chapter. So yeah, there's OWASP chapters all over the world. And so you can join OWASP. I think it's $50 a year. It's not a lot of money. Or you could pay $500 and be a lifetime member. And then you'll get access to the Slack channel. And then in the Slack channel, that's where all the fun happens, right? All the projects, all the chapters, everything else. Yeah, so please join.
You get work to expense it at work. You get lifetime.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's a great point. Very, very good. Yeah. Good. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Less than 100 MB, but when it becomes bigger, it will be easy for analyze them and find the
Vulnerabilities.
vulnerable.
Yeah. Okay, so is that in relation to finding vulnerabilities with AI or exploiting? Finding. Yeah, well, I would agree. So finding vulnerabilities is hard to do because there's a certain limit of tokens that that AI can utilize, and so you even know this if you do vibe coding. At a certain point, when your application's a certain size, it's like Claude freaks out. Right? I'm like, Claude, what are you doing, man? We had such a good thing going, and then you kind of lost it all. So yeah, when it gets too large, it starts breaking code and everything else. So yeah, I understand your point. So AI SAST might be a ways off, right? But we do have normal SAST today, and I'm sure it's SAST plus AI combination. So that's probably what it is. But I think where the real value is, and partly I'm saying this because I invested in Pixie, is fixing the vulnerabilities, right? You find them with static analysis, but then you can use AI to just generate the patch for you, and then you can human review it, do a pull request, and then merge it into your source code base. I 100% agree with you. So the question was for folks that are on, it's, hey, when we're using AI to look at source code, we got to break it up into chunks. We have to do all these unnatural things so that can fit into the context window. I agree. So remember when I told you about the researcher who found that 0 day, that person did exactly what you just said. They had to transform the code so that all of the pertinent methods were kind of all in a row so he could feed it into the LLM because of that reason. But I agree, and I think that all the time. Like, do we need to break every method almost into its own file so that AI can look at it better? But then again, it doesn't understand the larger context. So I don't have an answer of how we fix that, but I'm sure the 100 million that Mark Zuckerberg spent recently on AI folks are working on that exact problem. Per person. Oh yeah, per person. That's the sign-on bonus. Yeah. So those guys would have to answer that question. I think we got time for one more. Yes, sir. So the question is, what are the next 10 years? Well, if I knew, I'd be a billionaire because I'd invested all those things. Yeah. I'll tell you an unpopular theory of mine. I think things are actually not going to keep going exponentially better because you had first mover advantage, right? AI basically had, it ingested 30 years of stuff we had put onto the internet to kind of get all this knowledge base, right? So it pulled in all of Wikipedia. It pulled in like every conversation, probably going back to AOL, right? It pulled in all of this, 30 years of data that we had created collectively as a human being, and it pulled it into these AI models. But it pulled in things like Stack Overflow, and it pulled in this and pulled in that. Now you can see that a lot of the code that's going to be going into GitHub is going to be AI generated. So you're going to have this circular thing where it's not going to be human data going into the AI models. It's going to be AI data going into the AI models. And that's going to, I think, and again, if there's an AI expert here who wants to disagree with me, I'd love to hear that. But I think you're going to get a stalling out of its abilities. That's just my thought. You might have a different thought. Yes, sir.
I think the AI at some point starts generating
It could generate its own training data. Okay, so the question is, if it can generate its own training data, then it can use that to get better. Well, that's potentially true. I have to think about that though. So how would the AI, if the AI is creating its own training data, it's got to be somewhat quality, right, in order to train on it. So for those folks who are online, it was basically like, there's these two possibilities. It gets better, it gets worse. I think we take that conversation to the pub, right? So that's where we're going to go next. That sounds like one that we would do over drinks. So thank you all very much.
All right, folks, I just want to say thank you again to Jerry, to Matt, to Endor Labs, and to Pixie for sponsoring this amazing event. A couple of things. An announcement that I have is B-Sides Toronto. That's happening later this year. The call for papers is open. So if you have something to present, some research that you want to share with the community, just look up B-Sides Toronto, and they are accepting submissions now. Another thing that we typically do here at OWASP is asking if people are looking for jobs. So if you're looking for a job, raise your hand. Wow. All right. Is there anyone in the crowd who's hiring? Anyone in the crowd who's hiring, looking to fill in their teams? I'm sure people are open to options.
So I'll just mention, so I run a training company, so I'm always interested in research and things like that. So if you've got interesting research, if you've got ability to write classes in a wide variety of languages and topics, hit me up on LinkedIn.
B-Sides Toronto. B-Sides. Yeah. And then one last thing I wanted to talk about is, since the question was asked, we are the OWASP Toronto chapter. We organize events. We try to organize them monthly. It's open for everyone to join. It's free. So check out our meetup page. Check out our YouTube channel where the live streams are broadcast. And if you want to get involved, come speak to me, speak to Ignatius or Ophelia. We're always looking for volunteers and also speakers or ideas for events. And we're also looking for sponsors. So come talk to us.
Can I say one thing? I go to a lot of OWASP chapters, and this is it is such a beautifully run chapter. Can we just say thank you to the organizer and the organizing team? They volunteer to do this. So.
Thank you. So yeah, as Jerry mentioned, we're going to head to the pub after this. So it's optional, of course, but if you want to do some additional networking, we're going to be here. Thank you.
It's called the Duke of Cornwall. It's 200 meters from here, so 5 minutes walk.
It's on University.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, folks.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah.
Hi. Nice to meet you. Oh, sorry.
Wait, did they make you sign NDAs?
So I asked him if I could show screenshots, and the CTO said yes. I have that written.